Well, hello, Molweni, Sanu, Hujambo. I am Liesl Wilson. This is Unwrap Africa, of course, where we focus on the latest news, the trends, and the successes of the African continent. Let's keep those conversations going. Well, we're speaking of developments and looking at that question of the day. Just as the war intensifies in the Middle East, Africans trapped in the region are in a hurry to book their flights back to their respective countries. And so as we explore the dynamics unfolding, our question of the day really looks at what you think African governments are doing. Are they doing enough to repatriate their citizens? So you can keep the conversation going on our various social media platforms. Also find us on Facebook at SABC Unwrap Africa. Of course, also on our X platform, our handle at SABC News_TV. Well, let's look at what emerges from there. Perhaps also get further into that continental wrap for this hour. Well, the case against former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe's son, Belamine, will resume on Tuesday. Mugabe and his co-accused, they face charges of attempted murder, pointing a firearm and violating South Africa's immigration laws. The pair made a brief appearance in the Alexandra Magistrates Court last week and abandoned their bail application. As the Middle East conflict drives global oil prices upward, Nigeria is leveraging the Dangote refinery to stabilize its domestic market. So by processing 650,000 barrels per day locally, the refinery is shielding the country from war-related supply shocks.
I feel like people are afraid to get out of their houses. I am getting calls from my resident that I represent, city Minneapolis, saying that, what should I do? ICE is here.
The Trump administration is set to end the temporary protected status program for Somalis next week. The move will strip just over 1,000 people of the legal right to live and work in the United States. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security says conditions in Somalia have improved enough to justify ending TPS. Senegal's parliament has passed legislation that's to double the maximum penalty for same-sex relations, making them punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The law comes amid a crackdown on the country's gay community. The text was passed by an overwhelming majority in the National Assembly and must now be signed into law by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye. And South African filmmaker Zamo Mkwanazi's latest work, Laundry or Uhlanjululo, is currently in official competition at the 2026 Geneva International Film Festival and Forum on Human Rights. Set back in 1968 Johannesburg, the poignant period drama follows a black family's precarious struggle to maintain a laundry business in a whites-only neighborhood under restrictive apartheid exemption laws. Well, from that continental wrap, let's get further into some of those stories now. Perhaps take a look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, who's now hailed the United States for imposing sanctions on the Rwandan army and four of its senior officials for fueling the conflict in eastern Congo. U.S. Treasury Department said Rwanda's army has been providing direct support to the M23 rebels, violating Washington peace accord signed between Rwanda and the DRC last December. Let's take a look more on this. SABC correspondent Chris Ochamringa has more for us from Kinshasa.
A fragile ceasefire shattered. Renewed clashes between Congolese forces and the M23 rebels have rocked DRC's eastern provinces since late last year. The U.S. government brokered a peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda in Washington, D.C. last December. But fighting continued, and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels captured the strategic city of Uvira in eastern DRC just days after the peace deal was signed. The U.S. government has now imposed sanctions on Rwanda's army for actively supporting, training, and fighting alongside the M23 rebels.
That's a loss for Rwanda, and whatever was being earned through the army definitely will be a little bit difficult now. What we're looking for is Congolese in general not to say Congolese government, is to see the real impact on the ground. And the real impact will be the end of this war. And we are confident because I think this is the highest measure that has been taken against Rwanda.
The sanctions also include travel bans and a freeze on assets for 4 senior Rwandan officers. Rwanda's government has described the sanctions as unfairly targeting one side and distorting the facts of the conflict in eastern DRC. But many Congolese people are optimistic that the new measures could help end the war.
These sanctions are a great and a big step in the right direction, but there must be a part of a broader international strategy which want to build a lasting peace in the Great Lake region.
People are dying every day in our country, but the US has not done much to stop the killings. Let's take the example of the conflict between Iran and Israel. Fighting is going on over there. Why does the US only intervene militarily when Israel is fighting Iran, and not here after all the atrocities Rwanda has committed in our country for years? And they expect us to be happy with the sanctions against Rwanda?
I am happy because those people have made us suffer so much. The M23 rebels gained strength from the weapons and reinforcements supplied by Rwanda. Those sanctions have made us happy.
But not everyone shares that optimism. The director of US-based think tank, the Auckland Institute, recently said the sanctions are unlikely to meaningfully deter Rwanda from exploiting Congolese minerals that are fueling the war. Frédéric Moshoeshoe said nothing significant is likely to change as long as the US continues supporting Rwanda as a business hub for the refining and re-export of smuggled Congolese minerals. Last December, the US government signed a mining deal with the DRC to grant it access to the country's vast reserves of critical minerals. Observers say the move is part of the Trump administration's efforts to break China's dominance of the DRC's mining sector. Many people in the DRC have welcomed the latest US sanctions on Rwanda, but some analysts are skeptical, referencing the peace agreement signed in Washington, D.C. last year as a deal that prioritizes U.S. economic and geopolitical interests in the DRC's mining sector rather than establishing lasting peace in eastern Congo. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
The 2026 edition of the Moshoeshoe Walk has been completed. Participants from the SADC region and beyond descended on the Kingdom in the Sky for the 116 kilometers of walk split over 3 days. The second day of the walk had to be called off. That was due to heavy rains that really filled streams and rivers, rendering the route unsafe. But Lesotho King Letsie III came to congratulate and bid farewell to the participants as well.
For the 10th time in 2026, Her Majesty Queen Masnate is leading the pack of the 116-kilometer Moshoeshoe Walk. However, this year, due to heavy downpours, Day 2 had to be called off for safety reasons. This a concern to government.
Oh, it's been beautiful as always, but the rain messed us up yesterday. Isn't
that part of the fun?
But it's part of the fun, but for me, I think the message, because I'm part of government, the message for me is that we should have more bridges so that people who are scared of crossing rivers can come. Because yesterday a lot of people couldn't do it just because the rivers were full. So I think it's a challenge for us, it's a call on us to make sure that there are bridges, at least foot bridges, while we wait to get the proper bridges for cars.
It's exceeded my all expectations because it's very nice. To see a lot of smiling faces, and there are so many opportunities, just to meet people. It's also very good possibility to promote Lesotho to other Lithuanians.
To some, the walk has taken its toll on their feet, but they are adamant that it's worth the pain.
I walked for 3 days, guys. Look, my feet is like my go-go. I am walking for a girl child. to all the provinces, 9 provinces.
The trip was marvelous. We did enjoy it actually.
And you're still feeling it, you're going to do it to the finish line?
We are definitely going to the finish line in Tababusiu.
I really wish that there are stations by the villages where they cook for us so we can buy directly from them for the experience. So I'm looking forward to that.
And at the finish point, the Queen, with some moral support from her family, joined a pack to the rafters Tababusiu Arena, where His Majesty welcomed them. I'm amazed by your sheer strength, your patience, and commitment, that you can tolerate such hardships, tolerate the rains, the audacity to jump into flooded streams.
This is truly awesome. Risky, but awesome. That not only brings together the people of this country, but also brings together people of other nations within the sub-region and beyond. That unity, as you all know and as you have heard, it is what the founding father of this nation stood for and fought for.
In recognition of the Queen having completed 10 editions of the Moshoeshoe Walk, she and other high-ranking officials received medals of honor. 2027 will mark the 20th edition since the start of the Moshoeshoe Walk. I'm Rapelang Khatebe for SABC News, Tababusiu, Masegolesong.
Certainly a memorable encounter that perhaps one has to experience once in their lifetime. Perhaps as we continue with that question of the day, just recapping the question, also the thoughts that you've shared. As the war intensifies in the Middle East, Africans trapped in the region are in a hurry to book their flights back to their respective countries. And so we've been asking you, do you think African governments are doing enough to repatriate their citizens? This is what you've shared with your thoughts on the matter. Daisy Matlo says, we may complain about services, etc., but let's admit we have a caring government in other areas. Thank you, S.A. Durko, Clayson, etc., all for facilitating the return of our citizens to South Africa. Another thought from Leo there. Citizens face scanning says positive. At least all are South Africans. Even if my tax can be used, I'm okay with it as long as my fellow countrymen and women are safe. Every country must save their own citizens. And Mr. Your Plug, Minister Speaker, sharing a thought. USA can't rescue its citizens from Middle East, yet South Africa's doing it. When you are big, you are big. That's some of the thoughts in relation to the question of the day. Perhaps we'll leave it there, take a quick ad break, return with more on Unwrap Africa. Stay tuned. While we continue with news on the continent, Kenya's Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi says that the welfare of more than 500,000 Kenyans across the Middle Eastern countries remains a top priority, noting that no casualties or injuries involving Kenyan nationals have been reported since the conflict started. The Kenyan government has, however, urged their citizens to really make use of any available commercial flights, citing an inability to foot the bill to repatriate anyone willing to come back home. Policy governance analyst at Sovereign Insight in Kenya, Vincent Kimosop, now joins us virtually for more. Vincent, thank you for joining us here on Unwrap Africa. Perhaps given what is transpiring in the Middle East with the conflict, I mean, Kenyans who are now in the Middle East, they've reached out to their government for help. How has Nairobi responded to this?
Thanks for having me. So we have seen the government respond through the following measures. One, it's provided a compulsory registration just to get to ascertain the numbers of the number of people that are in these Gulf countries. It's approximated that there are 500,000 of them. Of course, there are those that went there through formal and informal channels. So the mandatory registration is to facilitate information, data capture, so that then interventions are data-driven. Number two is that the government has also activated its framework, particularly in the consulates, embassies, provided contact details. I was listening to the principal secretary responsible for diaspora affairs, ensuring that this information are provided for, people can call in to check and get information. And then the other thing that also has happened is that that it's also encouraged these members to be able to leverage on any available commercial flights. What I'm aware is that the government is not facilitating them to move back to the country. But the last I checked is that the Kenya Airways flight to Dubai is the last one that I witnessed that actually brought Kenyans back that wanted to be back to the country.
Okay.
So those are the information that we see from the government, which is information, registration, and then encouraging those that want to travel back home to leverage on any available commercial flights.
And so, Vincent, I mean, given the different modus operandi and the communication methods as well, there must have been some reactions from civil society, the opposition parties on this. What's transpired on that front?
Yes, there have been. I don't know if you're aware, the government has had a policy on labor migration, encouraging as many Kenyans to take up opportunities in the Gulf region. So this has been a government policy. Of course, no one expected that the war was going to break out, so this was an unforeseen. We have seen responses from the opposition calling for the government to ensure that people are repatriated, brought back to the country. Of course, also challenge the policy on labor migration, and calling on the government that people should be, that jobs should be secured locally. So this has also given some political fodder to the opposition. We also had civil society organizations calling, this includes the media, just urging the government to do everything to ensure that Kenyans are safe and Kenyans that want to come back home are given all the support that they require.
And Vincent, I mean, on that note, given the capacity, given the government policy that you've also cited, I mean, to assist those who want to return back home, I mean, are there any other organizations that have stepped in perhaps to assist the Kenyans? One would also look at the broader picture at large. I mean, the Middle East also forms part of the backbone of Kenya's, overseas employment, contributions as well. And so this war, does it potentially pose any economic fault lines for Kenya's economy if we look at that broader picture?
I think you cannot be able to say directly that it does, but looking at the data, particularly on the foreign remittances, because after the massive investment in the labor migration, we saw the numbers going up, particularly on foreign remittances, which now forms a significant part of our Kenyan economy, on access to foreign currency. As in, the numbers haven't shifted because, of course, of the duration. With this, we got into this less than a month. But I'm sure when we look at the data, maybe 3 or 4 months down the line, there will be some dip, particularly on foreign remittances, coming particularly from countries, the Kenyans who are in the Gulf region. In terms of direct, so the families, of course, that have relatives of those who are working in the Gulf region, the anxiety that comes, checking, following up. So those energies, instead of being directed into productive economic activities, they're now being directed towards getting to know where are their loved ones, what are they doing. So that, to some extent, may impact, but at the micro level, not to the level whereby can be nationally significant.
Well, Vincent, let's monitor that situation. Of course, it's a developing story given the geopolitical landscape that is transpiring, the shifting powers. But for now, thank you for your time with us on the SABC and perhaps also just weighing in on some of the developments and concerns. About 500,000 there, you heard the numbers. Kenyans stuck in the crosshairs of the widening Middle East conflict that will be monitoring government policy there, having encouraged people to go and obviously pursue economic activities in the Gulf region. But people obviously now being stuck there, questioning what the support is on offer, that communication remains open as that story unfolds. And even as we just recap the question of the day, with the war intensifying in the Middle East, Africans trapped in the region are in a hurry to book their flights back to their respective countries. And so the question we're asking you today is, do you think African governments are doing enough to repatriate their citizens? Let's take a look at some of the comments and thoughts that you've shared in relation to our question of the day. Well, Chloe, you weighed in. Many African governments not doing enough, especially for the scale of citizens affected, as well as the urgency. Some nations show targeted efforts, but the response feels patchy, reactive, under-resourced as compared to crisis level, and stranded individuals are often left to book expensive or limited commercial options themselves, heightening risks. Well, Joe, thank you for weighing in. We continue the conversation. Alvis also sharing a thought there. No, let's just look where we are staying. Discipline, start at your home, right? So you can do better on other people. Our government loses control. Heavy governments don't care. All right, well, Elvis, it's a developing situation that we're obviously seeing playing out in real time. And Uno Lali also weighing in. If they are, then the communication is terrible. Makes it very difficult for one to comment on whether enough is being done. Africans are forever on the losing end on things that we could have avoided, probably because the inept governments they are continuously voting for. While those thoughts continue and the conversation continues, of course, thank you for weighing in and being part of that conversation. Welcome back. Unwrap Africa continues. This next segment where Female Writers Festival recently celebrated female writers, and we caught up with Zimbabwean writer Bettina Gapa, who spoke about sharing African history through her writing. Let's take a look.
The great Toni Morrison wrote in her novel, Beloved, freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of that freed self was another. Tonight, we celebrate women who have done precisely that.
Her first novel, In the Ditch, was born of this, telling the story of a poor single parent in London. Many more books spilt out of her in the years to follow, among them Second Class Citizen, Joys of Motherhood, and The Bride Price.
Let's talk about the frustrated historian.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity to talk about how I am a frustrated historian. I love history, and I love especially African history. But then because I didn't actually do history, I thought, why not use my love of history in my fiction as a writer?
We need these stories to be written so that we can interrogate these histories, we can challenge these accounts and write back. I believe that these important histories should be written, and it disappoints me that they're not being written.
I think this is the next great untapped opportunity for African storytelling. Look at the success of the Marvel movie Wakanda, which it tells a story of an alternate Africa, an alternative Africa. Now, we have so many possibilities of alternative Africa if we look at our history.
Why do you think it's important for us to tell and teach our children the African history?
You know, the way we teach children to appreciate their elders, the previous generations, the past, is by teaching them history. And I believe very strongly that a people cannot create a cohesive identity as a nation, cannot really create a path and a vision for themselves if they don't understand where they come from. Because you know that not many children learn history in school.
which is a shame. I think it should be a compulsory subject.
Well, as we know, Africa continues to move, to evolve, and to inspire. Thank you for tuning in and for being part of the conversations. Do tune in next week, same time, same place at 8 p.m., of course, as we continue to unwrap Africa. It's goodbye from us for now.